Hey everybody, welcome to MT Guitar. Thank you so much for joining us today. Doing something a little different today. We're doing an introduction to flamenco guitar. And I'm going to be breaking down the very first lesson that anybody who would be interested in flamenco guitar should have, including essential techniques, a little bit of an overview of what flamenco is, as well as some basic Soleá, which is sort of the starting point of anybody who wants to really study flamenco. So flamenco comes from southern Spain. And it has a deep history rooted all the way back to India, from the Romani or the Roma, who were basically gypsies who traveled through India, from India through Arabia, through Persia, through North Africa, and eventually ended up, some of them in southern Spain. And basically it's a music that fuses many cultures together. So you have European and Spanish influences, of course. You have Arabic and Indian and Persian influences. So a lot of the scales are not really recognizable to the Western ear. A lot of Phrygian, a lot of harmonic minor and major, things that maybe relate more to an Eastern scale. So it's very magical sounding in my opinion. And I went to southern Spain twice, once as a 20-year-old and once about 6 years ago as a 30-year-old, to study flamenco, and really took this stuff seriously. And it's one of the hardest types of guitar to play, up there with jazz and classical. I would say it's more difficult technically than jazz and classical even. And it's traditionally taught only by ear or by orally, meaning it's not written down, although it's begun to be written down lately, but basically taught note for note and passed down through that tradition. It's incredibly complex and difficult to learn, but I can teach you the very basics and sort of the first lesson. So let's get into Soleá, which is spelled S-O-L-E-A with a accent over the A. And basically the two main chords of Soleá are E and F. And that's where the Phrygian scale comes from, which is basically the third mode of C major. But Phrygian is a great mode for flamenco because it sort of encompasses both the E and F chords. And normally when we play an E chord in a say a rock or blues song or pop, go to an F sharp minor or an A or something, and in flamenco we go to an F, then A minor, stuff like that. So the chord progressions are completely different, and therefore the scales are completely different. So let's talk about a couple techniques before I teach you Soleá. There's many forms of flamenco. There's bulería, there's alegrías, sevillanas, etc. Soleá por bulería. But what you want to start with is Soleá, which has E and F and A minor, essentially. And so we'll cover that in a sec. Let's do some techniques. We have something called Picado, which is when you use your index and middle fingers on the right hand. And what's different about that from classical or fingerstyle guitar is when we play fingerstyle, we generally, lift the fingers off the strings and they come towards our palm, which is great. It's a nice full sound. But it's rare that anybody would do resting on the next string in fingerstyle because it's not very conducive to finger picking, right? So generally, if we do fingerstyle, we call what's called a free stroke. And in flamenco, we do a rest stroke, which means we're resting on the string above it. So you can just practice this where you do a picado with the first and second fingers alternating, resting on the second string. Okay? And that's something that takes a long, long time to build up speed. You should do this very slow. Okay, the next technique we'll talk about is something called a raschiado, or as they say in southern Spain, a raschiado. And that's when you basically are going to use your fingers to flick the strings in a percussive, rapid, rhythmic way. And you do see this in classical, but it's, not all that common. And flamenco takes much bigger advantage of it. So the first one I should teach you is a 3-finger raschiado. And this takes, again, weeks, if not months, to develop the muscles. So you want to go put your thumb on this, rested on the 6th finger, and then flick down with the 3rd finger, and then the middle finger, and then the 1st finger, and then up with the index. And it turns out to be 16th notes, usually. Okay, you can do it over any chord. You can just do it muted. All right, so another common raschiado is one of my favorites. Is up with the thumb, down with the ring, and down with the index. And what happens is you end up doing this motion with your wrist here. And you can get really fast at it, but again, this is, I've been studying flamenco for 15 years, so it's something that takes a long time. Okay, so you got raschiados, you got 2 to work on there, this one and this one. Let's talk about a golpe. A golpe is something where, golpe in Spanish literally translates to hit. And flamenco is a very passionate music. It's also very rhythmically intense. And it's filled with dynamics, meaning soft and loud. And so, unlike classical where things are very beautiful, kind of and full of tone, flamenco is full of passion, so we need to accent things, right? So if I have, let me think of an example here. If I'm doing a lot of times flamenco is strummed with just the index finger. So if I'm resting my thumb here on the 6th string and I'm going up and down with the index, right? Up, down, up, down, up, down, up. And I want to accent that, this one. What I can do is I can do a golpe with the 3rd finger on what's called a tap plate. This is a flamenco guitar, and the difference between a flamenco guitar and a classical guitar is, for one thing, there's a tap plate on a flamenco, and it gives it that sound. It also protects the guitar because you don't want to poke a hole in it. So if you don't have a flamenco, just be gentle. Don't necessarily ram your finger through the wood there. But it's also, flamenco has lower action, so you can play faster. But anyway, if I'm playing an E7 flat 9, where I have an E major chord, but I put the third finger on the 3rd fret 4th string, and I hit a golpe with my 3rd finger. You have to have nails for flamenco on the tap plate as soon as I strum down. See? So. And that can happen all sorts of times. So here I'm doing down, golpe, and then Raschiado, and then I'm hitting again down. So it oftentimes is during a downstroke. You also will see golpes before the strings. And that was a middle finger slap up here before I even hit the strings. And then up with the thumb. It can hurt, so be careful. Okay, so you've got Picado, you've got Raschiado, you've got Golpe. Those are 3 things that you won't really find in too many other styles, so it's very particular to flamenco. You also have Tremolo. In classical, you would see a quadruplet tremolo, meaning bass and then 3 hits of the treble string. Very pretty, very beautiful. Flamenco likes to always make things a little more challenging, so they have a quintuplet, or 5 notes into one beat. So it would be bass, index, ring, middle, index. Very difficult to pull off. So that's something that also takes quite a bit of time to work up. So let's actually zoom in and do some Soleá. All right, so here's a little bit of Soleá. Let's say we're on an E major chord, but instead of being like here, normally I'm going to release the 3rd finger and replace it with the middle finger. So I have skipping the 5th string, skipping the A string, just these 2 fingers here, okay? And so I'm going to do a thumb, 6th string, and then I'm going to play ring, middle, index. Okay, it's called an arpeggio, also very important in flamenco. And then I'm going to go 4th string, pull off with the thumb to open back to 2nd fret. So the whole thing's slow in tempo. One more time. Okay, now I'm going to put the 3rd finger on the 3rd fret, and I'm going to hit all first 4 strings with the 3rd fret. That's a classic flamenco sound. Now I'm going to pull off to 2nd fret, pull off to open, hammer onto 3rd fret. And then bass. So let's do that. Bass. Okay, now you do this first part 3 times. Once, twice. Here's the 3rd time. Now we do 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and then thumb. Back to 2nd fret. Thumb, index, middle, ring. Now we're going to add a golpe. On the 2nd string with the thumb. This is all with the thumb. Thumb, thumb, thumb with the golpe. And then index to finish. Repeat. Okay, that's a whole 12-beat form. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. The accents were 3, 6, 9, and 12, which that's a whole nother discussion. So that would be a Soleá, and that would be one sort of round of it there. Let's do the whole thing slowly, and we'll be done for the lesson. Twice. Okay. There you go. So this is just an introductory lesson, but I will do more. If that's something you're interested in, just let me know.